So, you want to be a pharaoh, sit on a golden throne, wear a snake on your head, get fanned by servants while eating grapes the size of pigeon eggs. Sounds glamorous, sounds divine, sounds like a lifetime of luxury, power, and dramatic eyeliner. But let's be clear, being pharaoh was not all pyramids and parade floats. It was more like being stuck in a very sweaty, very political group project, with the constant threat of poison, betrayal, and spiritual annihilation if you forgot to sacrifice a goat on the right day. Sure, you were technically a living god, but even gods had migraines. You had to pretend to like your creepy high priest, marry your cousin to preserve the bloodline, and smile through state dinners where everyone wanted your throne or your head. Your sandals always had sand in them. Your sleep schedule depended on the moon phases, and your best friend was a scribe who never shut up about taxes. This wasn't leadership. This was survival with a golden hat on. So before you start building your dream pyramid, let's take a nice sarcastic walk through the nightmare. That was pharaoh life. Spoiler alert. It's miserable. Regal, yes, but miserable. Let's begin. So you've decided to start your day as pharaoh. Congratulations. You've survived another night of not being assassinated, sacrificed, or smothered with linen by an ambitious cousin. The sun rises over the Nile with cinematic flair, which would be great if you weren't already awake, sweating under 6 layers of embroidered linen sheets that smell like old incense and crushed beetles. Royal bedding is a scam. It looks impressive. Gold, threaded, animal, patterned, and probably cursed. But it itches in places linen should never reach and traps heat like a divine punishment. You sit up slowly, not because you are tired, but because the 5-pound cobra crown on your nightstand is already staring at you, like it knows you'll have to wear it again. That thing wasn't made for comfort. It's a glorified metal headband with an identity crisis. You put it on, and suddenly you are both king and migraine patient. It digs into your forehead while whispering, "You are sacred, but also sweating like a camel." Then come the attendants. Not one, not two, a small parade. They shuffle in with trays, oils, towels, and enough perfume to disguise the political rot wafting through the palace. One guy rubs your feet, another powders your chest, a third announces the day's schedule like he's thrilled. You get to inspect the temple bricks again. You nod like you are interested, but internally you are bargaining with the gods to be temporarily reincarnated as a goat. Goats have simpler lives. Goats don't have to settle legal disputes between crocodile farmers and linen merchants before breakfast. And breakfast. Ah yes, a spread fit for a deity. If that deity loved bland bread, lukewarm figs, and fermented fish paste, you poke at it with the enthusiasm of a man who hasn't had eggs in 2 dynasties. The food isn't meant to be enjoyed. It's ceremonial, symbolic. Basically a ritual in digestion. You eat while high priests hover nearby, staring like your chewing rhythm holds the fate of the universe. As you sip your sour beer and choke down a date, you look out across your palace courtyard. Marble floors, pillars carved with your face, gardens guarded by statues of you, and at the center, more of you. It's all very flattering and deeply exhausting. Every inch of this kingdom is a reflection of your divine authority, which means every mistake is also your fault. Crops fail, your fault. Nile floods too early, also your fault. Someone sneezed in the temple. Curse incoming, better get mummified just in case. You haven't even left your bedroom yet, and the pressure is crushing. The gods are watching, your advisors are plotting, your people are expecting, and your sandals still don't fit right because someone decided royal footwear should be decorative, not practical. So yes, You're the most powerful man in the known world. But you trade it all for 10 more minutes of sleep, a decent pair of socks, and a day without being treated like a holy vending machine. Welcome to your morning, Pharaoh. Now, smile. You are divine, remember. You've made it out of bed, which already deserves applause, considering you did it wearing 30 pounds of jewelry and a headdress that could double as a weapon. But now comes the real fun, putting on the royal crown. Not the little circlet thing you might be imagining, but the full ceremonial headpiece, a sculpted, jewel-encrusted cobra, and vulture situation that sits on your skull like a divine brick of judgment. It's supposed to symbolize unity and power. What it actually symbolizes is neck pain and heat stroke. You sit as the crown is lowered onto your head by trembling servants who know that if they slip, it's not just your mood that gets ruined. It's their career, their family, and probably their afterlife. The crown isn't just heavy, it's a commitment. Once it's on, you're no longer a man. You're the Pharaoh living God bridge between mortals and immortals. And nothing says divine wisdom like a metal snake staring down your forehead, while sweat pours from your temples. You try to adjust it slightly and immediately regret it. The thing is balanced like a trap. Move it wrong and it pinches, digs, or tips just enough to blind you in one eye for the rest of the day. But the worst part, you have to wear it everywhere. Ceremonies, judgments, inspections, even lunch. Yes, you're sitting at a stone table chewing on stale barley bread while this gold monstrosity compresses your spine one vertebra at a time. It's not optional if you show up without the crown. People assume the gods are angry, the crops will fail, and a plague is incoming, all because you wanted 5 minutes without a bronze bird pecking your scalp. And don't get any wild ideas about crown variety. You don't get to pick based on your outfit or mood. You've got your Upper Egypt crown, your Lower Egypt crown, your double crown when you are feeling extra. Each one has a shape that defies physics and a weight distribution that suggests the designer's hated necks. Want to wear the nemes, the famous striped cloth thing cute? Cute. Now sweat profusely while it sticks to your face like a damp towel during an awkward spa day. Some days you dream of crown. Free moments. A secret hour where you could let your bald spot breathe and your spine uncoil. But no, the public expects the full regalia. Every child wants to see the sacred headpiece. Every artist has to sculpt you wearing it. Even in statues where you're clearly relaxing, maybe holding a crook and flail with a just chilling expression. Guess what's still on your head? The damn crown, so you hold your chin high, not out of pride, but because any lower and the front cobra stabs your nose. You smile for your people. You radiate authority, and you silently pray to every god in your pantheon that you don't sneeze, tilt, or pass out from the sheer pressure of being this majestic. Long live the Pharaoh. May his chiropractor be blessed. So now that your skull is safely imprisoned under a small monument, and your spine has adjusted to its new job as a crown support beam, it's time for the next part of your day, breakfast at the temple, or as it should really be called, public performance while chewing. You don't just eat in peace like a mortal. No, you have to dine in front of priests, scribes, foreign visitors, and statues of gods who are definitely judging your table manners. You sit cross-legged on an uncomfortable stone platform that doubles as a sacred dining seat and a future back injury, while attendants present you with what can only be described as the least exciting buffet in divine history. The food is traditional, which is a polite way of saying bland and suspiciously warm. You get offerings of figs that are either underripe or fermented beyond redemption. There's goat cheese that smells like it's trying to reincarnate, stale flatbread hard enough to file your taxes on, and some kind of mashed bean situation that tastes like regret. You nibble delicately because you're being watched. Everyone is watching. The priests are analyzing your chewing for signs of divine favor. The high priest is probably wondering if you'll choke, and he can finally move up in rank. The scribes are scribbling furiously, recording how many dates you eat and whether you grimaced after the beer. Speaking of beer, it's warm, sour, and vaguely fizzy in a way that suggests it's still fermenting in your cup. You sip it and nod solemnly, pretending you love it. The gods must see you content, even if your tongue is screaming for something invented after refrigeration. You can't gag, you can't complain, you can't ask for honey unless you want to summon an entire debate on whether bees are divine enough to flavor royal food. And, of course, you can't eat alone. Oh no. You're joined by a procession of holy men who insist on reciting prayers between every bite. The morning blessing is longer than your appetite. By the time they finish asking Ra to shine upon your digestive system, your bread has gone even staler, and a fly has drowned in your beer. But you must smile. You must look inspired. You must look like you're having a religious epiphany, and not just dreaming about running away to live anonymously as a fisherman who eats in silence. Eventually, the meal ends, not because you're full, but because the temple bell tolls for the next sacred duty. You rise, stomach half satisfied patience, fully tested. You've just completed the divine breakfast. It was ceremonial. It was symbolic. It was terrible. As you walk away, someone sprinkles you with lotus water, someone else chants about the purity of your intestines, and all you can think is, I'd kill for a pomegranate that doesn't taste like sand. Welcome to breakfast, Pharaoh. Hope you enjoyed your sacred nibbling. Lunch is only 6 ceremonies away. You've barely digested your ceremonial sadness, and already the temple doors are creaking open, signaling the next highlight of your pharaonic existence. Worship, not you worshipping, of course. Everyone else is supposed to be worshipping you. That's the theory. In practice, you're now being dragged, regally, of course, into a hall that smells like old incense and wet sandstone, to bow in front of statues of gods who supposedly made you king, but now expect you to grovel like an unpaid intern. You shuffle past torch, bearing priests chanting in 7 different tones of nasal agony, each waving herbs that smell like scorched garlic and moral pressure. Every step echoes like a death announcement. You're led to the inner sanctum where the god's statue lives. A 10-foot-tall chunk of stone with eyes made of inlaid gems and an expression that says, I know what you did last festival. Here you offer gifts. You don't get to eat those. No. The gods get honey cakes, oils, wine, and fattened geese, while you stand there with barley breath and second-hand incense burns. You make the appropriate gestures, recite lines some priest wrote 100 years ago, and pretend you aren't swaying from heat exhaustion and existential regret. Then comes the ritual brushing. One priest brushes the god's statue, another brushes you. The symbolism is unclear, but the ticklish bristles are not. You try to look enlightened while suppressing the urge to slap someone with your ceremonial fan. Meanwhile, other priests ring bells, shake rattles, and hum at frequencies only jackals should hear. The goal, apparently, is to invite the gods' presence. But if the gods are actually listening, they're probably laughing. After the brushing comes the prayer. A long, winding, poetic list of everything the gods have done for Egypt, and how grateful you are to be their human paperweight. You chant with the conviction of someone who knows skipping a word could summon a plague. Meanwhile, the high priest stares daggers into your soul, possibly checking if you blink too much, and thus signal divine disapproval. You think about your spine, your crown, the warm goat cheese still fermenting in your gut. You think about how many hours this will go on. Finally, you are anointed, oil on the head. Oil on the hands. Oil on the very parts you were hoping no one would touch today. It's sticky. It smells like ancient tree bark and distant regret. And it drips down into your sandals, where it will live until eternity or your next reincarnation, whichever comes first. Then, with a fanfare that sounds suspiciously like passive-aggressive flute playing, the ceremony ends. You are declared pure, divine, and ready to go rule. Your attendants bow, your priests smile, your bladder screams because no one thought to include a bathroom break in the morning ritual. You exit the temple glowing with oil, weighed down by expectation, and already dreading the next sacred duty. This is worship when you're Pharaoh. Less spiritual awakening. More damp, scripted theatre with sweat stains. Blessed be. You emerge from the temple oily, overheated, and spiritually over it, only to be immediately greeted by your next divine privilege paperwork. Not scrolls of wisdom. Not declarations of war or dramatic death sentences delivered by torchlight. No, you get tax reports, border complaints, grain inventories, someone's goat went missing again, and now it's your cosmic responsibility. Your throne awaits, not the golden one enshrined in myth, but the uncomfortable stone slab tucked inside your palace office, surrounded by sweating scribes and the faint, unmistakable scent of old ink and stress. The scribe to your left is reading aloud a dispute between two farmers over whose ox farted first and scared the other's chickens into a tree. You listen with the glazed over-expression of a man who left his soul back at the temple altar. Beside you, another scribe is coughing dramatically, trying to get you to approve temple renovations, because apparently the gods are complaining about drafty ceilings now. You sign with a stylus made of bone, which feels less like a tool and more like a passive-aggressive joke from the gods themselves. Your hand cramps by line 3, and by line 7 you're fantasizing about retiring to a hut somewhere that doesn't require you to approve every roof tile in the kingdom. There's a stack of papyrus taller than your ceremonial wig. One scroll demands a judgment on a labor strike at the quarry. Another reports that a merchant tried to sell fake holy crocodile teeth to pilgrims. You raise an eyebrow, but no one laughs, not even the scribes. Everyone is too busy scribbling, whispering, or watching to see if you blink incorrectly and trigger a revolt. You want to scream. You want to throw a scroll across the room. But instead, you nod gravely and ask the high priest to bring you more wax for your seal. Because a pharaoh doesn't lose his cool, he just quietly dies inside, while stamping documents with divine authority. Every hour or so, a servant brings you a damp cloth for your forehead, and a cup of what they call wine, but tastes more like fermented grape sadness. You take a sip and immediately regret it. The scribe starts reciting a list of temple contributions. You stop listening after 50 jars of barley and mentally drift off to a fantasy where you're a fisherman on the Nile with a pet duck and no inbox. But you snap back when someone coughs politely and slides you another scroll marked urgent. It's not urgent, nothing ever is. Just someone else wanting you to confirm that their neighbour's date tree is definitely growing on royal land, and thus must be blessed or burned. You glance at the setting sun and realise you've spent the entire day as a glorified desk ornament with eyeliner, and there's still the evening procession to get through. So you roll your shoulders, sign your name one more time, and remind yourself that somewhere out there, another god, king, is also elbow, deep in papyrus and lies. Misery loves royalty. By the time you've signed your 100th scroll and pretended to care about the temple's pigeon surplus, it's finally time for a break, or so you think. But breaks don't exist when you're Pharaoh. What you get instead is an opportunity to show favour, which is palace code for changing outfits, smearing on more eye paint, and standing in the sun while people shout your name and throw flowers with alarming accuracy. Welcome to the daily procession, a walking display of divine fatigue dressed up as national pride. You're hoisted onto a golden litter carried by 12 sweating servants who've probably been regretting their life choices since sunrise. You sit stiffly on a throne built for aesthetics, not anatomy, waving like a marionette with a god complex. Your hand cramps halfway through the route, but you keep going because you're being watched, always watched by priests, by nobles, by small children with suspiciously sharp sticks. They cheer, they bow, they throw offerings, mostly bread, sometimes fruit, occasionally something unidentifiable that smells like regret. It's a festival of forced smiles and sunburns. Your body wants to melt. The sun is at full blaze, turning your gold headdress into a radiant microwave. Your tunic is sticking to places. Linen was never meant to cling. Sweat pools beneath your wig. And you silently mourn the cool, shady corner of your office where at least your misery came with furniture. As the parade winds through the city, musicians beat drums with the enthusiasm of men who haven't slept in 3 days, and dancers whirl with enough sand flying off their feet to exfoliate the entire front row. Somewhere near the temple steps, a priest begins reciting another 20-minute hymn. You zone out at line 5 and start counting how many more festivals are scheduled this month. It's 12. 12 more public parades where your spine will slowly turn to powder. Occasionally, you make eye contact with a local farmer or merchant, and they bow so hard it looks like their spine might snap. You want to wave casually, maybe shout, "It's fine, I'm just a guy in a skirt with eyeliner," but instead you nod solemnly, the royal gesture of a man who desperately wants a nap. Behind you, an attendant fans your back with a palm frond like it's going to reverse heat stroke, and a lifetime of unrealistic expectations. The parade finally loops back to the palace. You dismount with the grace of a sweaty statue and stumble into the shadow of your doorway, only to be told your evening bath is being prepared. You think about declining, but then remember it's the only time today you'll be alone, and not answering questions about grain rations. So you nod, wave again to the crowd, and disappear inside, where hopefully no one will ask you to bless another fish market or listen to another song about how divine you are. Being adored is exhausting. You shuffle into the palace like a sunburned mirage, robes dragging, face sticky with ceremonial sweat, and the only thing keeping you upright is the promise of your evening bath. It's the closest thing to pleasure a pharaoh is allowed. 15 minutes of lukewarm relief before the next wave of rituals, visitors, and passive-aggressive hieroglyph reports. The bath chamber is dim, full of flickering oil lamps and a smell that's supposed to be calming, but mostly just reminds you of wilted lotus and old ambition. 2 attendants are already waiting, smiling, like this is the highlight of their week, which, depressingly, it probably is. You lower yourself into the stone tub that's been awkwardly filled by hand with amphorae of tepid water and regret. The temperature is never right. Either it's slightly above room temperature and disappointingly uninspiring, or someone accidentally warmed it too much, and now your royal bits are being boiled alive like sacred lentils. You sit, motionless, arms resting on the slippery rim, as attendants begin the delicate process of pretending not to stare at you while scraping off layers of the day's dust, incense, and spiritual grime. A sponge is involved, so is some kind of imported soap that smells like a forest in mourning. You close your eyes and try to enjoy it, but one starts humming a cleansing chant, and the other keeps sneaking glances at the scar on your shoulder, an old arrow wound no one's supposed to mention because you're divine and technically immune to such nonsense. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a copper mirror, and wonder when your eyes started looking like they belonged to someone who spent his entire life being treated like a religious statue with taxes. You take a deep breath. The room smells slightly better now, still faintly like goats, but less aggressive about it. Then comes the oil, always with the oil. Some mixture of almond, frankincense, and expectations. They rub it into your arms, your legs, your scalp. It's supposed to make you shine, because shiny equals holy, apparently. But mostly it just makes you slippery and unable to hold on to things like dignity or peace. You're so greased up by the end of it, you could probably slide down a pyramid and take out half your court by accident. As they wrap you in a fresh linen robe and hand you yet another cup of herbal something, you catch yourself almost relaxing, almost. Then a messenger appears in the doorway, eyes wide with panic, scroll in hand. Something about a dispute near the Nubian border, of course. There's always something. Your brief moment of lukewarm bliss evaporates, and the robe already feels too tight. You rise, dripping and glistening like a sacred eel, nod to your attendants, and prepare to dive headfirst back into the boiling cauldron of politics, expectations, and divine bureaucracy. The bath was nice, almost human, which, of course, is the problem. You are not allowed to be human. You are Pharaoh. You're barely dry. The oil hasn't even finished soaking into your knees when you're whisked away. Again, the palace is buzzing, sandals slapping stone, whispers coiling through the halls like snakes that can read your stress levels. Something about Nubia, something about a border skirmish, something about, of course, consulting the High Council. Because nothing says divine authority like having to sit in a room full of aging men who smell like melted wax and think they know your job better than you do. You're led into the council chamber, a windowless tomb of opinions and lingering garlic. The moment you step in, the air thickens with self-importance. There they are, your advisors. Beards combed, scrolls ready, eyes full of the unearned confidence of people who've never actually commanded anything beyond their own dinner. They rise and bow dramatically, as if you didn't just see half of them last night when they were arguing about how many goats should be sacrificed at harvest. You nod, the royal gesture that means please make this quick, and take your seat on the ceremonial throne that is both too hard and somehow still manages to creak like it is judging you. They begin to speak, one after the other, voices like sandpaper and slow death. Everyone has a theory. No one has a solution. The priest says it is the gods testing your faith. The general says it's the Nubians testing your patience. The treasurer says it's definitely not the budget cuts. And please stop looking at him like that. You pretend to listen, but your brain is slowly melting into your linen wrap. Someone starts arguing about whether moving a military outpost 6 feet to the left would show strength or desperation. Someone else starts reading from a scroll so long, it deserves its own zip code. You clear your throat. Everyone falls silent like you just summoned a lightning bolt. You don't say much, because if you speak too soon, they'll argue with you. And if you speak too late, they'll assume you've died and start assigning your tomb walls. You declare a decision with just enough mystery that they'll spend the next week interpreting your tone. It's an art. You've mastered it out of survival, not pride. Then you wave them off, not because the issue is resolved, but because if you stay one more minute, you'll launch yourself into the Nile just to feel something. As you leave, they bow again, muttering about your wisdom, like it's not their indecision you just cleaned up. Your sandals slap against the stone as you walk faster than is technically regal, praying no one stops you with another emergency. It's dusk now. The sky is turning orange, the palace casting long shadows, and somewhere deep inside you a tiny voice wonders what it would feel like to not be consulted, to not be worshipped, to just be. But there's no time for that. You're needed for the evening offering. Of course you are. You're Pharaoh. You don't remember agreeing to attend the evening offering. Then again, you don't remember agreeing to half the things that fill your day. They just happen to you, like heat stroke or taxes. One moment you're fantasizing about sneaking off into the sunset disguised as a melon vendor, and the next, you're standing in another temple, arms outstretched, surrounded by firelight chanting priests, and a cloud of sacred smoke that smells exactly like regret and cinnamon. The evening offering is supposed to be the peaceful capstone to your day, a time to commune with the gods, express gratitude, and radiate divine serenity. Instead, it feels like an unpaid internship in theatrical suffering. You're dressed in your third ceremonial outfit of the day, a robe that somehow weighs more than your regrets, stitched with gold thread and gilt. Your wrists are heavy with bangles that jingle every time you try to scratch your nose, and your crown has been swapped out for the evening model, which is slightly smaller but 10 times itchier. It's covered in beads that slap your forehead every time you bow, which is often. You approach the altar with slow, dignified steps, the kind that scream, "I'm holy and I haven't sat down since breakfast." A priest hands you a bowl of milk. You pour it slowly over a stone falcon's feet, while a choir of boys sings a hymn in a language no one alive actually understands. The milk drips, someone claps, and suddenly you are being wafted with palm fans like you just performed a miracle. You haven't. You just poured dairy onto a rock. But it's fine. It's symbolic. Everything is symbolic, including your rapidly deteriorating posture. Then comes the incense, again. A brazier is pushed toward your face, and the smoke rolls over you like an accusation. You resist the urge to cough, because coughing would be seen as weakness or blasphemy or both. And next thing you know, some high priest is claiming the gods are displeased and asking for a fresh goose. So you inhale the sacred fumes, eyes watering, trying not to look directly at the giant mural of yourself painted on the wall, where you're depicted holding up the sun like it's a casual hobby. The drums begin. That means you've got 3 more minutes of chanting, 1 more offering, and exactly 0 chances of sneaking out unnoticed. You press your palms together, say the final words, and step back into your place as the crowd murmurs reverently. You've survived another ceremony, another performance, another round of pretending you're not 1 sneeze away from passing out in front of 30 gods and a room full of judgmental priests. The sun has fully set now, the stars are creeping in, and so is the dread of tomorrow. You bow 1 last time, smile, like it's not glued to your face, and retreat to the palace where hopefully, mercifully, no one else needs anything tonight. But they probably will, because you're not a person. You're Pharaoh, and pharaohs don't rest. They just reboot. The palace halls are quieter now, which is to say the shouting has dropped from a roar to a murmur, and only 3 people try to bow at you on your way to your chamber. It's night time, supposedly the hour of rest, except rest is a rumor you haven't experienced since your coronation. You peel off the ceremonial robe like a snake shedding expectations and collapse onto what passes for a bed. Solid wood disguised as luxury with a cushion, so thin it could double as papyrus. A servant appears, because of course they do, holding a tray with more herbal drink and a face that says, "Please drink this so I can go to sleep too." You nod and sip. It tastes like disappointment steeped in river reeds. You lie back, arms outstretched, staring at the intricately painted ceiling of stars, an entire galaxy crafted just to remind you where you supposedly belong. The gods above, your people below, and you stuck somewhere in between like a very tired fulcrum. Outside your chamber, a guard sneezes. Someone drops a clay cup. You hear it shatter. No one screams, which means it wasn't valuable. You close your eyes. Finally, except your mind doesn't listen. It replays the day like a punishment. The tax reports, the temple chants, The cow dispute someone brought to you like it was an omen. The border issue that's not actually resolved, just smeared with enough ceremonial language to look official. You remember the faces, the scribes, the priests, the dancers, the guards, always looking at you like you have answers, like you're divine. Like you weren't just a boy who liked boats and once tripped over a goose in the palace courtyard. You roll over, wrong move. One of your arm bangles digs into your ribs and the linen sheets cling to your skin like you owe them something. You sit up defeated. Somewhere in the palace, someone is playing a soft melody on a flute, probably meant to lull you to sleep. It only reminds you that tomorrow you'll be expected to make 5 more sacred appearances, review another pyramid's worth of scrolls, and approve 3 new statues of your own face. You think about running away, you always do briefly. Maybe disguise yourself as a merchant, sail down the Nile, find a quiet village where no one expects you to bless their soup, or interpret dreams involving beetles. But you know better. You'd be recognized before you hit the second bend in the river. Your face is carved on every wall, coin, and vegetable crate in Egypt. You belong to history now, and history has very firm hands. So you lie back down, staring into the dark, a god in theory, a prisoner in practice. Sleep comes eventually, not peacefully, not kindly. Just enough to keep you alive for another day of golden exhaustion, and somewhere a priest is already preparing your morning chant. Sweet dreams, Pharaoh. You've got another eternity to get through. Morning returns with all the subtlety of a chariot charge. There's no gentle sunrise, no peaceful awakening to the sound of birds. Instead, there's a loud knock on your chamber door, followed by the unmistakable voice of your chief attendant, reciting your schedule like he's reading a death sentence. You groan, which is apparently not divine behavior, and sit up with the grace of a mummy unraveling. The linen sheets cling to your legs like yesterday's expectations, and your spine reminds you that sleeping on royal hardwood is still just sleeping on hardwood. The attendants file in, eyes down, hands full. One begins brushing your hair like it's a sacred task. Another kneels with your ceremonial sandals, muttering something about alignment with the gods, which you assume is just code for "I hope this doesn't pinch again." You don't speak. Not because you're meditating or channeling the wisdom of Ra, but because you physically can't muster the strength to form words before barley bread. You blink slowly as a servant starts applying eye paint, dragging coal under your eyes with a precision usually reserved for surgery. It stings. Of course it stings, being majestic burns. Your robe is wrapped around you like a blessing and a trap. Layers of linen that whisper, "Today will be long," as they tighten around your shoulders. A golden sash is added, then a necklace that could deflect arrows, then a bangle you swore you lost, but apparently it's been found and returned like a divine boomerang of discomfort. By the time they crown you with your morning headdress, a different one from yesterday, just as heavy, just as unnecessary, you're fully transformed from exhausted man into holy figurehead. You step outside your chamber, and it begins, bowing, chanting. More bowing, a servant thrusts a tray of breakfast offerings at you. Flatbread, olives, something pretending to be cheese. You chew robotically, nodding as a priest launches into a report about a statue that's been weeping. You don't have the heart to tell him it's probably condensation, or possibly someone's prank, because apparently jokes are a crime if the gods are involved. Halfway through breakfast, a general appears. He's gruff, armored, and whispering about a potential uprising in the western provinces. You nod again, mouth still full of olives, already calculating how many scrolls this will mean. How many more meetings, how many more nights lying awake, wondering if your divine rule will end because someone's cousin got too ambitious with a spear. By the time you finish eating, the entire day has been mapped out in ceremonial detail. Sacrifices, appeals, blessings, a festival you forgot about, a visit to a noble's estate where you'll be expected to admire his grapes and pretend not to notice the bribes tucked inside the offerings. So you take one last sip of date wine, square your shoulders under the weight of another day, and step forward. The gods await. The people await. Your sandals are too tight, but you are Pharaoh and misery, like your headdress fits perfectly. The estate visit was not your idea. It never is. Nobles send invitations with too many titles and too much perfume. And suddenly, you're on a boat gliding down the Nile like a floating monument to social obligation. You sit beneath a gilded canopy with your knees at the wrong angle, your back too straight, and your patience fraying with every splash of water against the side of the vessel. The sun is relentless. The breeze is a lie, and the attendants keep pretending you look comfortable, when in reality your left foot has gone numb from sandal, induced circulatory betrayal. When you arrive, the noble's estate is exactly what you expected, lavish in the insecure way only new money can be. Columns that lean just slightly, walls covered in poorly proportioned murals of gods who look mildly offended to be there, and a garden that smells like someone tried too hard. You are greeted with bows so deep they might be digging wells and compliments so thick you could use them as roof plaster. The noble himself is all smiles and sweat, draped in silk that screams, "I'm trying too hard," and eyes that scream, "Please validate my entire existence." He presents his wife, his children, his cats, and eventually the grapes. You're led to a marble patio where a servant offers you a bunch of them on a golden plate, like they're sacred relics. You eat one. It's fine, juicy, slightly sour. Not worth the bowing ceremony that preceded it, but you nod solemnly, and now the noble looks like he might cry from joy. He starts talking about expansion, about trade, about temples he could help restore. If only someone divine might endorse him. The message is clear. Here's your fruit. Now please bless my social climb. You spend the next hour wandering through sun-baked courtyards and admiring fountains shaped like ibises while being trailed by a man narrating every architectural decision he's ever made. You pretend to be intrigued by the layout of his granary. You pretend the flute music drifting in from the garden isn't giving you a headache. You pretend the dried figs he offers aren't chewing through your last nerve. Eventually, you're led back to the boat, stuffed with gifts you didn't ask for, and polite promises you won't keep. The noble bows again, nearly topples, and you make your final royal gesture. A small, elegant wave that somehow says, "Thank you, I'm leaving. Please never do this again." The boat drifts off, carrying you back toward the palace, where more ceremonies, more scrolls, and more silence with your own thoughts await. You lean your head back, eyes closed against the setting sun, wondering how many more grapes you'll have to eat in the name of diplomacy. Being Pharaoh means never saying what you actually think. It means nodding at figs, smiling at sycophants, and sailing home with sore knees and a heavier crown. The gods may own your soul, but the nobles, they own your calendar. You return to the palace just as the last glow of the sun slips behind the date palms, dragging the heat down with it and leaving a stickier kind of discomfort in its place. The boat docks, the attendants leap into action, and once again you're reminded that even your steps must be dramatic. You're helped off like your legs haven't worked since the last dynasty, and before you can even yawn, someone's announcing your arrival like you've just come back from war. No one mentions it was just a grape tasting session hosted by an insecure landowner with too many statues of himself. Inside, the palace is dim and overly perfumed. The torches are lit, the halls echo with sandals, and your evening is nowhere near done. Because now, of course, comes the most suspicious part of your role, listening to the advisors. Again, apparently something urgent has developed. It always does. This time it's a priest claiming to have had a vision, a general complaining about troop morale, and a scribe who found a grammatical inconsistency in the tax records and is now losing sleep over it. You sit in your council seat, bones aching, and try not to scream as another scroll is unrolled, like the world depends on it. The priest goes first. He's sweating more than usual, eyes wide with celestial panic. He claims a star moved slightly to the left last night, which obviously means the gods are sending a warning. About what? He isn't sure, but probably about you. You nod with the serene expression of someone pretending this is helpful, and not just a cosmic weather report. The general takes over, voice booming about unrest among the lower ranks, which is apparently your fault because their boots are uncomfortable and their rations taste like flour. You resist the urge to ask him when he last ate flour. The scribe is next. His entire personality is papyrus. He's shaking as he points out that someone accidentally used the symbol for hippopotamus instead of grain in a provincial census, and this might lead to a diplomatic crisis. You blink at him slowly, then instruct someone to fix it and never tell you about it again. He looks relieved. You feel hollow. The meeting finally ends. You rise like a statue being pried from its pedestal and shuffle back toward your quarters, robes whispering around your ankles like bored ghosts. Your sandals slap the stones softly, your crown slightly askew, your face stuck in the expression you've worn since mid-morning, dignified misery. You pass murals of your younger self smiling, radiant, holding a crook, like it wasn't going to give you lifelong back pain, and wonder what he'd think of you now. When you finally reach your chamber, no one speaks. They know better. You lie back on the too-firm bed, gaze up at the painted constellations, and think being Pharaoh isn't just a job. It's a full-time performance. And tonight, the mask is cracking. You're not sure when you drifted off, but it wasn't restful. Sleep as Pharaoh is never a gift. It's a loan taken with interest, and the debt comes due the moment the night watch stirs outside your door. You wake in the same position you collapsed into, limbs locked like you've been mummified early. The painted ceiling still blinks down at you with judgmental stars. You try to stretch, but something in your back protests with a noise that shouldn't come from flesh. Morning hasn't arrived. And yet, of course, someone's knocking softly, respectfully, annoyingly. You grunt. That's all they need. The door creaks open, and in comes your senior advisor. Face pinched with the kind of seriousness that only ever leads to more work. He apologizes for disturbing your rest, in a tone that means he's not sorry at all. You sit up, rubbing your eyes with fingers, still slick from yesterday's ceremonial oil, and brace yourself. There's been a death. Not a scandalous one, not a betrayal. Just a high-ranking noble, old enough to have personally met the first pyramid. He's dead, and now you must mourn publicly, loudly, with all the necessary rituals, processions, and poetry, because apparently being Pharaoh also means being head mourner for people you barely tolerated. Within the hour, you're in your mourning linens, scratchier, darker, and somehow more depressing than your usual attire. A black sash is tied around your waist, like grief needs accessorizing. You're led into the temple courtyard where priests chant in minor keys and incense hangs in the air like invisible judgment. The noble's body lies wrapped and presented, arms crossed, mouth sealed shut with a charm that supposedly ensures he won't gossip in the afterlife. You almost envy him. You step forward, place a ceremonial flower on his chest, and offer a speech someone else wrote for you. It's filled with honorifics, praise, and lies. You deliver it flawlessly, your voice strong and your face unmoved. This is your gift, you make grief look divine. Inside, you're just wondering how long this ceremony will take and whether the noble's estate will now be redistributed, which means more paperwork. Someone nearby sobs with enthusiasm. You resist the urge to ask if they're auditioning for something. The procession continues down the temple steps into the city, through crowds trained to wail on cue. You wave solemnly, lips pressed, chin high. People throw flowers. Someone shouts a prayer. A child cries because someone told her to. You keep walking, every step dragging the weight of another man's legacy behind you. By midday, the sun is merciless again. The chants blur together, the bodies committed to the tomb. The crowd disperses. You return to the palace, more tired than when you left, your black sash damp with sweat and symbolism. You strip it off the moment you enter your chambers. No one's watching now. You breathe. Another death. Another mask worn. Another day survived. And somewhere in the palace, someone is already planning the next ceremony. You don't grieve. You don't rest. You rule, and ruling, it turns out, is just a very slow kind of burial. You barely have time to peel off the mourning linen and wash the incense out of your hair before the high priest arrives, completely unaffected by the fact that you've just publicly buried a man and internally buried your will to live. He announces, with the cheer of someone who hasn't stood in the sun for 4 hours, that it's time to review the new pyramid plans. Of course it is, because nothing says refreshing afternoon activity like sitting through an architectural presentation about your future death box. You follow him down the corridor, past the same frescoes of you smiting enemies in the exact same pose you've never once done in real life, until you arrive in the planning chamber. There, spread across a table the size of a fishing boat, are scrolls, blueprints, and a clay model of your tomb. Your tomb, just a casual little meeting about where your eternal remains will be stuffed once you stop pretending to enjoy goat cheese and divine responsibilities. You sit already exhausted and listen as the architect launches into a breathless monologue about innovative incline techniques and symbolic ventilation shafts. You nod thoughtfully while secretly wondering if it's too late to just be cremated and tossed into the Nile. The priest interjects every few minutes with theological requirements, like the correct orientation of your burial chamber relative to Sirius, or which god statue should face your feet. You try to care. You really do. But all you can focus on is how the sarcophagus sketch looks suspiciously uncomfortable and whether they've included any space for regrets. The architect asks if you'd prefer basalt or rose granite for your inner sanctum. You say granite, why not? You'll be dead. Let the ghosts enjoy the extra sparkle. Then comes the discussion about the funeral procession. Apparently it needs to be uniquely grand, which means more animals, more dancers, more incense, and definitely more songs about your eternal wisdom. You smile tightly, picturing your corpse being carried through streets, while bards improvise verses about your radiant gaze and unshakable peace, all while your real legacy is someone muttering, "Didn't he forget his own birthday once?" The meeting stretches into the late afternoon. Scrolls are swapped. Diagrams are debated. The scribe takes notes like you'll be grading him from beyond the grave. Finally, mercifully, they ask if you approve. You say yes, not because you care, but because you'd rather die in the wrong tomb than endure another hour of stone geometry and spiritual logistics. You stand, dismiss them with a wave, and retreat to the solitude of your chamber. You lie down, not to sleep, but to breathe just for a moment without being divine, without being eternal, without being anything but tired. The pyramid can wait. Death will come soon enough. For now, you are still Pharaoh, which means you get to plan your own burial while trying not to collapse from the weight of staying alive. You try to close your eyes, just for a second, just to pretend you're not spending your waking hours designing the luxury coffin of someone who isn't technically dead yet. But peace, like privacy, is a fantasy in this palace. You've barely exhaled before a servant taps politely at the doorframe and mutters the 4 words that make your soul wilt. The foreign envoys await. Of course they do, because nothing screams diplomacy like entertaining strangers in a room where everything, including your smile, is carved from obligation. You rise again, robe, again, crown, again. This time it's the ceremonial one reserved for intercultural relations, which basically means it has extra gold so visitors feel inferior on arrival. You're escorted to the audience hall, where 2 men in shiny robes and suspiciously forced grins stand waiting, surrounded by their entourage of interpreters, guards, and a guy whose only job seems to be holding an unnecessarily long feather. You take your seat on the throne, not the comfortable one, but the angular slab of divine intimidation that cuts into your thighs and screams, "I haven't known joy since the first flood season." The envoys bow, you nod. The translator begins. It's all pleasantries at first, blessings to your land. Praise for your temples, admiration for your radiant aura, which, let's be honest, is just sweat. Then come the gifts. One lays out ornate jewelry. The other presents a rare bird that looks like it wants to die immediately. You thank them both graciously, while your advisors whisper behind you about tariffs and treaties, and whether the rare bird could be trained to perform tricks at dinner parties. And then, finally, the real purpose of their visit slides into the conversation, like a crocodile in the reeds, trade agreements, land use, possibly a marriage alliance again, because apparently the best way to seal international peace is to offer you a niece you've never met and hope she can produce politically useful offspring before your back gives out entirely. You smile, you nod. You say something vague and regal, like the gods will guide our union, which everyone knows is code for, let me get through this without screaming. The meeting drags. One envoy talks too much. The other sweats too much. The bird poops on a scroll, and no one acknowledges it. Eventually you offer wine, a vague promise of further negotiations, and the kind of smile that says I'd rather be anywhere else, including the afterlife. They leave satisfied. Your advisor pats himself on the back. The feather guy bows so low you think he might faint. You return to your chamber as the sun sets, weighed down by diplomacy gold, and that damn crown. You take it off with shaking hands and drop it onto a cushion, like it personally betrayed you. Being Pharaoh means accepting every gift with grace, every alliance with strategy, and every hour of your life as a performance you never auditioned for. And tomorrow, you get to do it all again, with a new crown, and maybe a second bird by nightfall. You think you're finally safe. The envoys are gone. The scribes have slinked off with their scrolls, and for once, no one is singing, bowing, or asking you to bless something. The palace grows quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when everyone else is asleep or pretending to be. You sit on the edge of your bed, barefoot, crown less, robe unbelted, for the first time today feeling like maybe, just maybe, you exist as a person, and not just a walking monument with a pulse. Then, of course, it starts, a whisper, then another, then the unmistakable shuffle of feet trying not to be heard. You know that sound. It's the sound of a secret meeting forming without your consent. And since you're Pharaoh, you're expected to attend even your own ambush. Sure enough, a young servant appears in your doorway, wide-eyed, breathless, and visibly terrified of delivering the message. Your presence is requested in the Hall of Divination, he says, as if it's an honor, and not the middle of night equivalent of being summoned to the principal's office by the gods. You sigh, Slip on your sandals and make the long walk down the dim corridors where the walls echo with the regrets of 1,000 past rulers who also thought the night belonged to them. The hall of divination is cold, lit by flickering lamps and the nervous energy of men who speak to statues more than they do to people. The high priest is already waiting, surrounded by junior priests in ceremonial garb that looks like it was made by someone hallucinating. You nod, he bows, then he gestures to the offering table, where entrails are neatly arranged next to a bowl of sacred water and a dried ibis foot. They've had a vision again. This one involves an eclipse, a two-headed jackal, and a dream someone's cousin had about a fig tree growing upside down. Apparently, all signs point to an omen, one that requires immediate interpretation, a new decree, and possibly a human sacrifice. Although they're still deciding the severity, you listen, your face as blank as the moon, while the high priest elaborates with hand gestures, so elaborate they might be summoning a thunderstorm. Eventually, he asks for your divine insight. You want to say, "I think you're all asleep, deprived and possibly constipated." But instead you speak slowly, with as much mystery as possible. You mention balance, the river, the stars, anything vague enough to be profound. They nod, they murmur. One priest actually starts crying from the sheer holiness of your non-committal metaphors. The ceremony ends with a chant. You're sprinkled with perfumed water. Someone blesses your eyelids. You return to your chambers damp, irritated, and no closer to understanding how dried bird parts dictate national policy. You fall onto your bed, exhausted beyond language. Being Pharaoh doesn't end at sunset. It lingers in dreams, in omens, in late rituals, where no one sleeps and everyone stares at the sky, hoping the stars will explain your exhaustion. They don't. They never do. You wake to the sound of arguing geese. Not exactly divine music, but it's what you get when your palace garden doubles as an aviary, and your windows don't quite close. Your head aches, your back is locked in a position invented by curse, and your mouth tastes like ceremonial incense and regret. The dream you had, something about being chased through your own tomb by an ibis holding a scroll, refuses to fade, and frankly it feels less symbolic and more like a review of your week still. You rise. Slowly, mechanically, you've stopped calling it a morning routine. It's more of a repeated resurrection. The attendants arrive without being summoned, because you haven't made an unscheduled movement in years. One begins rubbing your shoulders with oil that smells like crushed ambition. Another presents your robe. It's clean, pressed, and still somehow smells like politics. You sit while they strap your sandals, one whispering about the day's itinerary, like he's revealing the secrets of the underworld. You're supposed to visit the royal granaries today, inspect the grain, wave at the workers, pretend to understand how wheat becomes bread without having touched either since your coronation. So you go, because saying no would require explanation, and pharaohs don't explain. They simply appear. The walk to the granaries is long and dusty, and the sun decides to personally attack you the entire way. By the time you arrive, your crown feels like a stovetop, and your inner tunic is clinging to places that should remain unmentioned. The overseer greets you with a bow, so dramatic, he nearly topples into a barrel of lentils. He shows you around like he's auditioning for your next lifetime. There are sacks, more sacks, a rat trap that may or may not have a tenant. Everything smells like old hay and mild panic. You nod a lot, say things like, "May the harvest be blessed and the gods smile upon this storehouse," while discreetly trying to keep flies out of your mouth. Workers pretend not to stare. Children peek around corners. Someone hands you a single stalk of barley like it's a precious gift and not just something that fell off a wagon. You thank them, because pharaohs thank people now, apparently, on the way out, A woman places her hand on your robe. Just for a second, a small worn hand, no words, just a look. The kind that says, "We're trying." And for one breath, the performance slips, not for long. Just a moment of human leaking through the divine script. You nod. She nods back. Then she vanishes into the crowd and you're ushered back toward your golden transport like nothing happened. Back at the palace, you sit in your chamber, robe, dusty crown, tilted, grain stalk, still clutched in your hand. It's quiet. Not peaceful, but quiet. And for once, no one's chanting. You stare at the barley and wonder if this is what being sacred has come to, smiling for the hungry and pretending you know what it means to be fed.